As we enter here week 3, I'm going to be splitting this lesson, like in the last few weeks, into 2 different parts. This first part, we are going to focus on the Form 941 and how to fill it out with using an example problem. And then I have an extra practice problem with answers provided in IVY Learn for you to try as well. Part 2, we're going to really get into Social Security and all the ins and outs of Social Security, and just so you have a real good idea of what is when people will ask you as an accountant different things about Social Security, because it's on people's minds as they retire, and you'll have a real good idea of a lot of the aspects. And I think you'll find that very interesting as we get to the Part 2 lecture. All right, so as we start out here with Form 941, the main reason why accountants or businesses in general have to fill it out is the IRS is making sure that you are, as the employer, paying in the appropriate employment taxes that you're collecting from your employees, and then your part as well, and that you're sending in the right amount every time you have to pay, whether it's monthly or biweekly. As we ended last week on, we talked about the look back period. So now we're going to figure out how much do we actually owe, and we're going to do that with a detailed problem using FICA wages, where what we learned last week, where certain items weren't taxed. We're going to continue with that this week, and the items like medical premiums and 401k premiums that you have to take out of your check. Some of those, like the 401k, are taxed, but not for federal. Medical premiums aren't taxed for 401k, so we're going to see how that works. All right, so as we move into the notes, you can read through some of these here. The first thing that I'll bring your attention to is that you do have to file a 941 every quarter, and it's due by the end of the next month after the quarter. So if you're in quarter one always would end, if you're on a calendar year, March 31. So yours would be due April 30th. With the exception, if you had turned in all your payments on time, then you do get a slight extension, 10 more days. So you could turn it in as late as May 10th. All right, so what we're going to do at this point is I have a 941 in IVY Learn in my notes section. If you want to go ahead and pull that out, that would be good. I'm going to bring it up here on the screen as well. As when you go through, whenever you're an employer of at least one employee, you'll need to have an an EIN number, an employee identification number. It's like a Social Security number, but for the business. The business has its own number as well. Every time, if you're an employee, you have to have one. Excuse me, if you're an employer. And then the next thing we're going to do is check one of these boxes over here for which quarter we're in. Line number 1 is just simply asking how many employees do you have employed at whatever quarter you're in at that the specific date that they give. So you just list an actual number. And then in line 2, these wages and tips, and we'll kind of go through these with my notes as well. The notes, that's not it. So notice here with line 2, it wants your total federal taxable income. So that's something, it doesn't necessarily state there right on the 941, but that is what the form is looking for, not your gross income or your gross wages that you pay the employees. It's looking for the federal taxable wages, and we'll get into that next week. We're going to look at which items are taxable for the actual federal income tax. We've done that for FICA, and it's very similar. There's just a few differences. Number 3 is how much you've actually taken out of all your employees' checks, the federal withholdings that you've taken out. Line 4, we're not gonna worry about line 4. We're gonna skip down to line 5A and 5C. Those are the 2 we're gonna work on, and those, along with the very bottom, line 5A is going to be your hardest line, along with the very bottom, line 16 in part 2. So we'll see how that works and why that one is going to be the most difficult to get column 1. To get column 2, that's not difficult. You're just going to multiply by this percentage they give here. And notice that percentage, that number should maybe ring a bell to you. If you do 6.2 for the employee's part, and then you do 6.2 again for the employer's part, that's where they get the 12.4%. And then Medicare. Medicare isn't nearly as tough to find the wages, the taxable wages. And then you're going to multiply that by the employee and employer together, so the 1.45 times 2. And you'll get the amount. You're going to add up all the amounts here from column 2 and put them here in line 5E. And then simply you're going to go here and for line 6 and add up the federal withholdings plus your FICA totals for 5E. And you're going to get then how much do you owe. So line 6, we're going to find that we're not going to worry about line 7, 8, or 9. So line 6 is going to be the same as line 10. And then we're going to come down and line 10 is going to be the same as line 12. We're not going to worry about having any differences. When we get down to line 16 is simply to show how much did we have liable that we owed to the government for month 1. That's scary. No, I'm just trying to make sure this doesn't bother me. Okay, so for month 1, month 2, and month 3, we're going to add those up. We're going to look at how we get those numbers as we do a problem. And so let's go back to my notes. At this point, it's good to go ahead. I can explain it all I want, but it's actually, I think you'll find it easier as we do a problem. Let me try to take this off. Okay, sorry about that. All right, for the cool kids, I have 2 employees. We're in the 4th quarter. Mike earns a weekly salary of $2,900. And then we got our other employee who makes 23 bucks an hour. Everybody is paid weekly. And this is going to come important. You'll see why this comes out here in a little while. But December, we're going to opt that is the month that has the 5th week in it. Okay, so we've got October has 4 weeks, November has 4 weeks, and December for this quarter is going to be the one that has 5 weeks. It's not always going to be like that, but for this problem, it is. And then I tell you here that Mike has this much, and Jackie has 90 bucks taken out for federal taxes. So I'm telling you how much because we haven't learned how to do that yet. I've told you here how much in federal taxable wages are taken out, for 401k, and how much medical insurance is taken out as long as flexible spending, because remember, some of these items aren't taxed for FICA purposes. So, all right, let's get in. I'm going to pull up and at this point, you'll want to go ahead and pull up your register that we made back in week 1. So go ahead and pause the video at this point until you have that up, and then we're going to begin to look at how we would fill out this lecture example number 6. All right, so hopefully you have pulled up your lecture example that you can fill in. What I would want to start, what I think you should start out with is the first thing we want to put in is our gross wages for the current pay. So we've got 2,900 here and 920. And that's what I simply have told us in the problem. I simply just took the 2,900 and then the 920. All I did is took the $23 that we earn an hour times 40 hours. And that's how much Jackie earns every week. That's going to be our starting point. So when I come over here to see how much wages has Mike earned so far, completely without anything being factored in, just simply the gross wage, all I did is take the H2, 2,900, and multiply that by 48 pays, because I told us in the problem we're in pay 49, week 49, because we get paid weekly. And then I do the same thing for Jackie. I take that 920 here, this cell, and I reference it, and then times it by 48 for the previous pays. Now, I'm going to skip over the federal for just a second and look at what I did to get, well, now I know how much gross wages I've made, and that's good, but how much have I made that's actually been taxable? Because not all of the $139,200 has been taxable. Some of it, like the Medicare premiums and the flexible spending, those are taken off. Those aren't taxed. So what I've done is I've taken my cell H2, the 2900, and then I go and find the amounts that aren't taxed. So when I go back into the problem, it says for Mike, and remember the 230, the 401k is taxed for FICA. We're going to find that it isn't for federal. But I know that the medical insurance is not taxed, as well as the flexible spending. So I want to take those off of the 2900. So in a sense, I got 2900 minus 90 for the medical premiums, minus 70 for the flexible spending. That will give me a certain amount each week that I have that's taxable. Multiply that by 48, and you'll see where that brings me. And I made it like this where it's really close to the cap. If you remember the cap from back week 1 and week 2, it's 132,900. And that's going to come into play here in just a few minutes. Now, as long as we haven't hit the cap, our Medicare wages are going to be the exact same as our Social Security. Now, as soon as I do hit the cap, this guy here, this E2, will stop at 132.9 once I hit the cap, and that will happen here this next pay. But Medicare will keep going because Medicare has no cap. So that's why we have a different column for each one of these. So we do the same for Jackie. We start out with her 920 as our base, so H3. And then we subtract the two amounts that I give us in the problem. She doesn't have any 401k, but she does have the medical insurance and the flexible spending. So we take out the $40 or the 70 and the 50 from the 920 starting point, the gross, multiply that by 48 pays. It's going to be the same as Medicare because we haven't even come close to hitting the Social Security cap. And then you're going to see for the federal wages, we're kind of getting just a tiny bit ahead of ourselves. This is going to be more week 4, but I want to show you how it's done. It's very easy. It's the same as the Social Security, except we add in one more item, the $230, because then for 401k, for any retirement payments, those are not taxed for federal income tax at the time of the paycheck. They're taxed when you take it out later when you retire. That's when the money's taxed. So this one is going to look exactly the same, except we go ahead and take out the extra 401k. So this is very important numbers, especially this one, when we go and get ready to figure out our current taxable wages. So our taxable wages, the federal one is easy. We can start that out first. The federal one is basically what we just did over here to find our prior, except I'm just not multiplying it by 48 now. I'm just simply taking the 2,900 starting point and subtracting the 401k, the medical, and the flexible spending. And every time that we have a paycheck, next week we would use this 2510 to look up how much taxes need to be taken out for federal insurance. In this problem, I tell us how much taxes. I just made up a number. But going forward after this week, we'll actually figure it out. Now, the hard part, and the only one that's kind of different, and that I have it highlighted here, is the one where Mike hits the cap. Because if you are doing it off to the side, and I'll just bring up a calculator here, if we took 131 to 520 and added in the 2,900 current, actually the 2,740 taxable wages this time, if we were doing, because we want to know what is our wages that are going to be taxable for Social Security and Medicare. And we simply just take our 2,900 minus the two things that aren't taxed. So if I add in the 131,520, add in the 2,740 of taxable FICA income, I'm going to go over the cap. Remember, the cap was 132.9. So I don't want to tax all 2,740. I want to find what's left. So remember what to do on what's left. You take the 132.9 and subtract out the 131,520. That leaves me with 1380, and that's what I did here. So that's what I would want you to do in your work that you would turn in, is show me how did you find the cap. And you can just show me with an Excel reference like this. 132.9 is what the cap is, minus where I'm at so far for taxable wages for Social Security, this E2. And that tells me then when I'm just going to reference this cell, it says 1380 is the amount that's going to be taxed. The full 2740 is taxed for Medicare because there is no cap, and we already did the federal income taxes. For Jackie, we do the same thing, except she doesn't hit any caps, and she doesn't have any retirement packages that putting money aside, so it's actually going to be the same all the way across. Her federal taxes are taxable income is going to be the same as her FICA taxable income. Now, if you set up your payroll register correctly back in week 1, you should have these 2 items already calculated for you. So you can take a peek here and see if you got the same amounts. This one we have to manually enter, and I told you what these are back in the problem. I told you here they were $380 and $90 for each of our 2 employees. We'll get into state and county withholdings in the next week or 2, so we're just going to leave those blank for right now, and we'll build on that. And then I told you we can manually fill these in, the amounts for the retirement, medical, and flexible spending. And if you set everything up right, your net pay should calculate for you. In your register that you have, you'll also have some items out here, the FUTA and the SUTA. We're not going to worry about those until we get to week 6. So those you can just leave blank for now. Also, if you have everything set up correctly, you should be able to get your wage expense, your employee journal entry portion done. And then you're going to have a couple zeros here for items we're not doing. And then a couple journal entries here that correspond with our withholdings that are not taxes, and then our cash, or if you haven't paid it yet, your wages payable as your final amount, which should equal your net pay. And then the second journal entry showing the Social Security and Medicare, the FUTA and SUTA, we're going to get to those later. We'll get to those in week 6. But these simply just echoing what was up here, the 135 and 51. Now we're ready for the new stuff. We're ready to start filling out Form 941. All right, so our line 1 would have been 2. I didn't ask you for that on this one. I started in here on line 2. And you'll want to go ahead and fill in the 941 right here on your payroll register. Go ahead and just put in that you're doing 941 right below where you figured up your Social Security cap, somewhere in that area, so it's easy for me to find. Line 2, remember that's your federal taxable wages. And note that that's your federal taxable wages for this 4th quarter only. And we're filling out the Form 941 like it's the end of the year. So even though I had you do the register for the 49th pay, I wanted you to just to get used to doing it. But now that we're at Form 941, we're pretending now that we are at the end of the year, and we need to show what should the numbers be for the end of the 4th quarter only. So we look at line 2. Remember that was your federal taxable wages. So if I go up here to my federal taxable wages, and I know that 4th quarter, or every quarter has 13 weeks, I can easily determine line 2 just by using my payroll register. I take this column I4, you'll see I did that here, I4 times 13 weeks because this is a job that pays per week. And that's how I can get line 2. It's pretty simple. And I can do that because there are no caps to the federal withholdings, to the federal income tax withholdings. And if there are no caps and you're taxed the same amount every single week, as long as you make the same amount and you work the same hours, you can easily do that. And I have that assumed for our easy problems. So we can do the same thing for line 3. Line 3, I'm simply going to see this is what was withheld for this certain pay. And as long as they work the same amount, and we're assuming that they did all 13 weeks of the quarter, I can simply take the 470 or cell 04 and multiply it by 13 weeks. That's how much I should have collected for federal income tax. Now it's when we get to box 5A that it's the hardest. And I had mentioned that. And why? So what I have done, and what I would like for you to do as well, whenever you get to box 5A, kind of break it off to the side and show me how you're going to get your answer. Because with 5A, I cannot simply come over here and do what I did for line 2 and take this number, or in this case, this number, and multiply it by 13. I can't do that because Mike's wages for Social Security are going to be different, 3 different wages, because for weeks 40 through 48, he didn't hit the cap. So he would have been taxed at the full amount, the full $27.40. This current week in 49, he hits the cap. He's right there in the middle, so he's taxed on some. But then when you get to weeks 50 through 52, he's not going to be taxed on anything. He's going to have $0. So that's why we have to break down his to figure out how much does he have to pay, or how much wages are we taxing Mike, and then we're going to do the same thing for Jackie. All right, so I'm trying to summarize this here in the Excel sheet. He's hit the cap on the 49th pay. So all the previous fourth quarter pays, that would be 40 through 48, and if you add them up, don't say that that's 8, because it's not. Count them on your fingers. It's actually 9 former pays. So for 9 former pays, he was taxed on the full amount that he earned, the full $27.40. So what I did is I took the $27.40 times 9, and then for that 49th pay, I added in what we had this month, or this week, which was $13.80, which was taxable, right here. And that tells me how much of his wages are actually taxable for Social Security, because then for weeks 50 through 52, he doesn't have anything taxable. So that's how I got, and you can follow the formula if you want. I took K2, I came over here and said, okay, this is how much he made before he hit the cap, times it by 9, and then added in his current Social Security wages. And then I do the same thing for Jackie, but Jackie's real easy. Since she doesn't ever hit the cap, it's just the same amount all 13 weeks. And so I simply just took the 800 times 13. So line 5A is going to be these two added together, the wages for Mike and the wages for Jackie. And we would do that no matter how many employees we had. So the 36,440, that's where I get that. This number is easy to get. You simply multiply it by what the form shows. If you remember back to the form on line 5A, take your column 1 and you multiply it by the 12.4%. Let me get this. So that's how I got the 4518, taking this column, the M14, times the 0.124. Line 5C is easy, like I had said earlier. All you got to do, because there's no caps to be hit, you just got to take what is my current taxable wages for Medicare, and since there's no caps, it's going to be the same every week as long as the employees made the same amount. So I'm simply taking this cell K4, and multiplying it by 13 weeks. And then I'm going to take whatever that amount is and multiply it by what the form says. So multiply it by 0.029. That brings me, I don't have you, and you could, if you wanted to, you could put in here line 5, I think it's F, and add up the 2 FICA amounts. I'm not requiring on this one to do that. Just go ahead and line 6, and you're simply adding up the 3 totals. You're adding up line 3, line 5A, and 5C, and that's what I've done here. So that's how much I should have collected during the fourth quarter, and that's how much I need to have paid. That's where my verification is going to come into play. On the back side of the 940, we fill this out if we're a monthly depositor, and we are assuming we are, unless told otherwise, you are a monthly depositor. So I need to first figure out how much did I owe in taxes for the month of October. And I need to remember just a couple things. October in our examples has 4 weeks, because I told us that December is the one month that has the 5th week. So we're going to have 4 weeks, and then we got to think, did anybody hit any caps? And the answer is no. Mike didn't hit the cap until the 2nd week of December, week 49. So there's not a whole lot for me to do, but I went ahead and filled out this little extra. This is showing my work, and this is what I want you to do, is to show you the work off to the side. But the federal withholdings, those are pretty simple, straightforward. You're simply going to come up here and figure up they had 470 this month or this week. And as long as their pay doesn't change, they're going to have 470 every week. So that is cell 04. If you take cell 04 times the 4 weeks in October, you can figure up how much total in federal withholdings were taken out. Social Security. Now, this is where you got to be careful. You can't just come up here and take 135 times 4, because 135, that's only for that 1 week in December. Usually it's going to be higher than that. So we've got to figure out how much wages did each employee have in October for Social Security, knowing that nobody hit the cap. So that's what I did. I broke it down again. I show Mike. Mike had, if we go back up, the $27.40 in wages for Medicare. So that's going to be the same for Social Security as long as the cap's not hit. So we take the $27.40 that would have been taxable times the 4 weeks of pay, and then I simply multiply that by 0.062. So taken out of Mike's check was $679.52. And then you can see here's the formula I used. So there's no mistakes in my math, and it came out the same. And then for Jackie, hers is really straightforward. She had $800 every week that's taxable, times 4 weeks at 6.2%. Now, if you just add these two together, you're not going to come up with the correct amount. Notice that if I add these two together, it's much less than the 1755. That's because the 1755 not only takes those two and adds them together, but it multiplies it by 2. And that's because we've got to add in the employer's portion. That's also taxable. And that's also going to be paid in and due. For the Medicare is an easy one. You don't have to break it down like this. You can simply, since Medicare doesn't change and there's no cap, I can simply take this number, multiply it by the 4 weeks, and then multiply it again by 2 to add in the employer's portion. And that's what I did right here to get this formula. Now, if you add up these 3 amounts, this is what I should have paid for the month of October. Now, for the month of November, since it also has only 4 weeks, and since nobody hit a cap in November, I'm going to have the exact same amounts as I did for October. Now, this is not always going to be the case. I'm going to have some examples where the individual hits a Social Security cap in the month of October. So you're going to actually have to redo this calculation for the month of October, November, and December, because where the caps hit. Or I may say that the month of October is the month that has the 5th week. And then you're going to have to redo it for the month of November because it only has 4, and December would only have 4 full weeks. But in this case, it works out that it's the exact same. So we also owed the $4,046.48 for November. Now, December does change. December, you'll notice that the federal withholdings are the first thing to change. And that's only because up here for October, we took 04 times 4 weeks. But for December, we take 04 times 5 weeks. That's the only difference. Social Security, I actually need to work it out again. So let's figure out what I did for Social Security. I break the 2 employees down, or however many I have. So Mike, I know that in pay number 48, because if you count them out, 40, 41, 42, and 43, that's October. 44, 45, 46, and 47, that's November. 48 was our last week pay, and Mike hadn't hit the cap yet. So in week 48, pay 1, he's taxed on the full amount, the full $27.40. Pay 2, week 49, he's only taxed on the amount that we figured up in the register at 6.2%. And then for weeks 50, 51, and 52, he's not taxed on any. So if I do what the calculations here for each week, I can figure out how much did Mike owe in Social Security. And then I can do the easy one for Jackie. She had $800, no caps hit, so that's just 800 times the 5 weeks at 6.2%. So to figure out my Social Security, it's simply the 248 plus the 255, and then remember to multiply it by 2 for the employer's portion. Finally, the Medicare, I do the same thing as I did up here. I take N4, but instead of timesing it by 4, I'm going to take N4 times 5 for 5 weeks, and then multiply it by 2 for the employer's part. Now comes the final piece to see if we did everything right. This is your checkpoint. You add up October, November, and December, and you're going to get a total for the 3 months. That total better be the same as what you got for line 6 and 10, and ultimately 12. So the 11,963, notice it's the exact same as the 11,963. So there you go. That is how you do a 941 form. I will have this sheet, and it's protected, but you can look at what cells I used as formulas. And then I'll have the answers as well for the practice one. I would highly recommend you do that and see how you do before you actually do this week's assignment and that you turn it in. So with that, we're going to sign off for part 1, and then we'll come back for part 2 with the Social Security and really looking in depth into that. So at this point, I will stop, and we'll see you in just a few minutes.